Good afternoon, buenas tardes, bienvenidos a ¿Qué pasa, Mujer? Welcome to ¿Qué pasa, Mujer? We're here every Sunday at 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Estamos aquí todos los domingos a las 4 de la tarde. ¿Qué pasa, Mujer? Ha estado en vivo ya llevamos como 2 años. So we've been here for about 2 years. ¿Qué pasa, Mujer? Es una plataforma donde hablamos de todo y todo. So this is a platform where we talk about everything and anything. Last week, we talked with Enrique Acosta Gonzalez about the hostile workplace. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And halfway through the year, and I hope you guys are keeping up with your goals, we're going to go ahead and bring Nicte on so she could give us a little update about her goals and the things that she's been doing, and maybe if we've had to revise anything over there on your Hawaii coast.
Yes,
Long
I
time
forgot
ago.
I was on mute.
Oh, you're
First of
fine.
all, I love how we are syncing with our
Mm.
colors.
Let's see what
Unplanned.
Maddie's wearing today.
I know. Be a drum roll when she comes in. Um, it's it's been good. It's been busy. Very busy. Just trying to juggle a lot. So, but yeah, thankful for the sun. Thankful for the great weather. And yeah. How
Good.
about
I love
you?
it. I've been doing good, busy as well. I want to say productive busy, because sometimes we do things that are busy, but they don't have substance. So
Mhm.
just making sure that my busyness is effective and making sure that I have balance. Usually, the end of June is busy for me because it's the beginning of my summer camp, and I just kind of like to have my hands in it to kind of troubleshoot certain things. And I kind of like reflect back on my progress throughout the years, right? So ultimately, the goal is for me to not even touch it and just let it run. But I have been able to kind of see the progress where I was there all the time to, just kind of gradually pulling back and just allowing other people to run the camp. So just doing that, just making sure that I properly place myself and others to live their best life, as we would call it, and that I want to like semi-retire in 4 years. So that's my that's my drive every day. My youngest son is going to be graduating from high school in 4 years, so that's how I came up with the 4 years. So I just want to be able to pull back a lot in 4 years, once he graduates. So that's the goal. That's why I get up in the mornings every day and come up with a plan so I can semi-retire, because I don't think that I'll ever be 100% retired, to be honest with
Mhm.
you. um I think that I'll always do something either for the community or for children, whether I get paid or not, but I will have some type of activity.
I
So
love
that's
that.
that's what I've been doing. We're gonna go ahead and bring Maddie on and see if she's
Let's see.
wearing
Let's see.
a contrasting color.
Yeah, we'll see. Where's the drum roll? The
I don't know how to do a
suspense.
Mark, we're ready when you bring Maddie on. But we were talking to Enrique about hostile workplace last time. And
Mm.
so it was very interesting. So it made me think about hostility outside of the workplace as well.
Mhm.
Hola, Mari, ¿cómo estás?
Mira, there's
Buenas
some warm
tardes.
tone.
How you ladies doing?
We're doing good. And
Good.
you?
How are
Awesome,
you?
awesome. Good, I'm good. I'm blessed right here.
Oh,
Very good. I
bueno.
love it. I
We
was
were
telling you.
wondering if you're
Mhm, go
gonna
ahead.
wear orange. This was not planned, but you're within the warm and the neutral, so you're a balance.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know how I look in your screens, but in my screen, like I'm on the bottom by myself and you two are by my side. So,
Yes. So,
it's
Mark,
perfect.
A
don't mess it
balance.
up. We like it just like this. The two oranges at the top and the what is that? Does that bring us balance, Nick? There, her
Mm-hmm.
color.
Mm-hmm. Because Maddie has that pop of color with like warms, but then she also has that nice neutral top, so it's kind of like a nice nice little
Yeah.
I have
balance.
my colors over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see
Yeah.
that y con the warms, like the
Yeah.
red. vino tinto, yellowish, oranges. From
Yeah, I
what I
love it. So
yeah.
Nikta, you will be static at my summer camp this year because the theme is colors. So
I
I linked up
love
with
that.
a art studio. So we're studying everything about colors, the psychology of it, the emotions of it. So we're teaching the kids why they connect to the color that they connect to.
Love that.
So then they're talking about that and talking about themselves, and we're using the emotional wheel a lot, and it has colors.
Oh, I
So that's our
love
theme for this
that.
year. Yeah. So it's been really nice to experience that. Maddie, I was telling Nicte that last time we talked to Enrique about the hostility in the workforce. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the hostility outside of the workforce. And we always kind of talk about culture here, and so I started thinking about how does our culture, Latinos, but then also my family culture, how did that impact me as to how I currently do hostility? So my beliefs, my values, who do I use as support system when I'm kind of going through, and who do I go to? Like what is my process? And also how do I express my emotions towards that conflict, towards that challenge? So I kind of wanted to get your input a little bit, because I think what happens is, I'm an only child, so I just grew up watching people. So,
Mhm.
I'm infamous for like just watching and then kind of talking, right? And so I wanted to ask you, Nikte, because you did have a sibling, how is it that you think, what are some things that you picked up from your childhood that you see that is evident today as to how you handle things when challenges come?
Oh, that's a good question. I think growing up, I was unfortunately taught to be quiet a lot. So I wasn't allowed to like kind of like voice my concerns, or if I messed up, I wasn't really allowed to explain like, "Oh, I thought I was doing this and this is why I messed up," or those types of things. So with that, it made me become a lot more like how do you say, you internalize a lot of things, but you observe and then you don't learn to speak up, and that affects you later down the road. And so I had started to see people would take advantage of me, sometimes family, and it was a two-sided thing where you allow things to happen because you don't set your boundaries, you don't know how to set boundaries. And then the other thing is like, okay, people become adjusted to that norm. So as I became an adult and I started to really listen to more of my intuition, that inner thing that drives you, I started to realize I have to set boundaries, and setting those boundaries for when people got used to you being a certain way, being submissive, being what was perceived like very emotional or in tune with my emotions. I knew that was my strength later on. I just didn't see that because I wasn't encouraged to see that. So for me, a lot of those experiences shaped me to want to do things differently, to want to shift that. So my brother and I would support each other a lot when we would, something would happen, or we would try to like be each other's support. So early on, I learned, and it didn't become something that I realized, but I learned to become self-sufficient and to learn how to manage adversity or challenges on my own and not really have that support externally. But that made me stronger. I didn't realize that until later. So what it's helped me is realize how important it is to learn your boundaries, stand up for your boundaries. And even when you're in that transition point where you are starting to, and this applies not just personally, but even if you run a business and you start to have boundaries with your employees or your coworkers, and you run a certain way, some people may not understand that. They may not respect it because they like the you version that says yes all the time, or the you version that can get taken advantage of. So it's that season of transition that I think it's hard, but it's also beautiful for you as a person to honor that. And I've seen how it started from how we are raised, like all those things you learn, you become more aware, and then how then you transfer that to when you have kids. So now when my son has done something, instead of shutting him down and say, you're not supposed to do that, or, yell or get angry. Okay, well, why were you thinking of doing that? Like, what was your thought process? And kind of just letting him explain. I was like, oh, okay, I understand why you were thinking of doing this. That makes sense, but that's not something that we should be doing. So me learning to not, I forget the term, but when you're in that reactionary mode, you just spew out, you're angry, you're talking, instead of letting that take over. Like you were saying, Viviana, with how you grew up, you learn more to observe, to process. So that's something that I'm like, okay, instead of being reactionary, slowing down, thinking, okay, how can I teach a lesson without making it to where like you're yelling and then that person's like more in the, oh my God, I did something terrible. And they're not listening because you're kind of in that frozen state of mind. So it's all right. Let's talk through this. And yeah, and it's nice to be able to work on doing the flip side and then seeing the benefits of, oh, okay, I was able to slow down. And then my son was able to see, oh, okay, I understand that we're not supposed to do this. I'm like, okay, what lessons did we learn? And then he was able to say, I know now I shouldn't be doing this because of this. And he wasn't afraid to say it. It wasn't like, I'm never going to do this again. It was that nice perspective. So
Yeah, wait
that's
until
my,
he's a teenager. Your reaction is going to be different, right, Maddie?
I
You're
hear,
going to have
but
to find new techniques.
yes, but you know what? That's like, I feel like when you're learning a new sport or riding a bicycle, the sooner you can start practicing, the better I'm going to be by the time that,
Oh,
because
yeah.
if I wasn't doing that now, I would definitely be reactive, a lot more reactive when he gets older. And
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
two-sided thing too, because I don't ever want him to feel like he can't explain what he was, even if it was wrong. I don't ever want him to feel like he doesn't have a voice or he can't explain why he was thinking of like, I don't know, I wanted to be creative and write on this block, or I'm like, okay, I understand that. But yeah, that to me, having a voice is so crucial and so important, because I feel that amplifies as they get older and not having to figure out how to get your voice when you're as an adult.
Yeah, I think that's very important. It made me think when you were talking about, when we grew up, I think that was the norm, right? Like, cállate o te callo, right? Like you weren't allowed to talk. So I think that was just a culture back then, right? So today we do allow most of us allow our children to have a voice. And then to me, I think it's providing balance, right? Because, and I think also for you to be able to teach him that other things exist, right? So that he's not always going to meet an ikte that's going to kind of coach him through this, right? So as he gets older, you'll be able to kind of coach him through that. Just this past week, I had a conversation with my youngest son because his dad was asking him, like, what did you think about your performance at the game, and how do you think the team did as a team? And my son said, I don't know. I don't remember. Right. So then that triggers dad, like, what? So it kind of escalates the conversation. So I heard the conversation. So when we got home, we kind of, this is me helping him communicate better, right? So I was like, okay, what are some things that happen in basketball? Throwing, passing, cutting, running, free throws, whatever, layups. So we made a list of all the activities that happen in basketball. Okay, so now give your dad 2 goods and 2 bads about you, 2 goods and 2 bads about the team, right? And then use the verb, because you know exactly what basketball entails, right? You just maybe don't want to have the conversation, and that's why you said, I don't know, I don't remember, right? But to alleviate the conflict, that because you're about to have conflict once you already know your father doesn't like to hear I don't know, right? So you already know it's coming. So I think it was effective. And like, I kept a note at the table, and then we talked about it the next day as a reminder, like, hey, did you think about anything extra? Is this something that you could do when you talk to your dad next time? So I think those things, I don't remember my parents doing that with me. I don't at all, right? It was just like, cállate, whatever. Like it's kind of like you almost, I know for me, like I knew that I shouldn't even talk. Like I wasn't yelled at a lot. I wasn't beat on a lot. Maybe once That was like I don't have that story, right? But at the same time, it doesn't mean that there were some things that maybe my mom could have done different that would have made me a better person. But I just think that it's just part of the process and just part of life, and everybody's going to go through something, right? Maddie, I wanted to ask you about the point that Nick that made about the support, right? So, and still making that connection as to how you were raised and how you respond today. But how was it when you were younger and you had conflict? Did you feel like you had support? And then what support do you have today? Like, do you feel that support in any capacity?
So I think, there's a lot of influences in how we respond to this question. It's kind of like a build-up question, because I think there's a lot of cultural influences. If you look at how we were raised, especially those of us who got to live in our countries, that we can remember, because I know you came really young, Viviana, so I don't know if you remember living in your country, so but how, cultural influences, then I would probably say generational. You are a second generation, or a first generation. You were born in Colombia, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, you are first generation, still. So first generation, second generation. Also, I think it matters the order of birth. For you, you talk about a lot of being an only child. I'm the third child, the youngest, and the only girl. So literally, I grew up seeing my brothers, but my brothers were 6 and 4 years older than me, and they were getting in trouble, but it was a different kind of trouble, because they were boys, so it was very different. Again, being a girl, being the only girl, everything was different when it came to me. It's like my brothers did something. Oh, he's a man, he's a boy. Something happened to me. Oh, the baby, the little girl. Girls don't do that, and that kind of thing. And then I also think education has a lot to do with it. If you think about your parents, I know my mom only had a second grade education. My dad had an 8th grade education. Now, fast forward, you look at me, I'm a college graduate. My husband is a college graduate. So the way we confront our speech, our language, the way that you express yourself, the tools that we may have to be able to do that is very different when you compare our upbringing to our parents' upbringing. So, so going back to the question, how was my support system? Again, culturally, I grew up with a lot of people around me. My mom came from a big family, so I always knew that I had my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my friends. So there was thousands of people around me. It was just a matter of who can I relate to. So, I will always say, the support system was around me. It was just who's going to understand me the best, and I think that's kind of what sometimes you struggle with. Who's going to understand what I'm going through right now? And I think now, being older, it's the same thing. You look around and you kind of see, who's around you, who's going to understand what you're going through. And sometimes it's not a matter of who's going to understand, it's who's willing to listen, because sometimes when we are frustrated and you are like in the middle of, like they say, in the eye of the storm, it's about, kind of like expressing yourself. And I don't know about you girls, but like with me, when I'm frustrated, like I could think in my head that something, is the end of the world, this is it, this is the end, oh my God, and then you start explaining to somebody else what's going on in your head, and it's like, it's not that bad, So sometimes, talking or saying your problems out loud, even though they may seem like the end of the world, when you start talking, sometimes it's like, that's what I'm saying. Like sometimes it's not about somebody explaining it back to you, but somebody willing to listen so that you can express it and then kind of sometimes answer your own questions. But yeah, I think family, it's huge.
Yeah. And as I listen to you guys respond to this, it also makes me think about the growth mindset, right? Nick, there, like you said, let's learn from the mistake. Let's learn that it's okay to make the mistake. Even if you commit the mistake twice, like at least maybe it wasn't as big as the first one or something like that, right? And it makes me think about, like Nikte and I, because we're first cousins, your mom has been like a low-key entrepreneur, pretty much, right? And then for you to be an entrepreneur today, but just in a different level, in a different way. But just the fact that she, sometimes is not necessarily the things that they say, but the things that they do. So I saw entrepreneurship growing up as well, and maybe that's another show that we can have Enrique come in. But just where does entrepreneurship come from? Because it's not for everybody, right? Like I love it, I enjoy it, I don't know what I would do without it. Like once I got a taste of not having to clock in and clock out, was just amazing. But sometimes I add up the hours and I'm working more than a person that's working 8 to 5, right? But like I'm happy with it, I'm extremely content with it, right? So I think sometimes we can see challenges or negative things that maybe we grew up with that we saw as negative, but to see the resilience in it as to how it impacted me, because I'm not doing that. Like I tell my mom all the time, like you need to behave, because when you get older, like don't make my life more difficult, like my life needs to be easy. you know so, and then I know that it's going to happen to me, I'm going to get old, so I'm going to try to be a good old person to my kids. So I think, nobody's perfect, everybody's going to have flaws, and I just think it's what we do with it that should stand out more. What do you
I
think,
love
Nicole?
that. I love what you're kind of backtrack to what you were saying, to where the flaws. And I think what is powerful, and it ties into what you were saying, Maddie, earlier, is our generations. I think with this generation where we are now, we are no longer culturally seeing as asking for forgiveness when you made a mistake as a bad thing. I think culturally, especially within matriarchs or women in our culture, and sometimes men, that it was perceived as if you ask for forgiveness for messing up or saying something that you should, it was seen as you're being weak. And it's kind of like, so you never address it. And I think what's powerful about where we are now, and I personally have perceived that a lot with like the Gen Z generation, that kind of pushes that cultural norm that was established in saying, owning when you mess up and acknowledging that. There's been times when I lose my cool, and I have done it maybe twice, where I accidentally yell at my son because I'm frustrated he wasn't listening. And he calls me out like, "Mom, you yelled." I'm like, you know what? Yes, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled. I was frustrated. So like I have been able to address the situation and own up like I made a mistake, because I feel like that in itself, that lesson teaches us that we don't have to live this perfectionist life, that we can make mistakes and we can learn from that. So that's one thing, as you were talking about, Viviana, that I love that you were saying, we're each going to make our own mistakes. I know you always hear parenting doesn't come with a guidebook. There's things that I know that I'll make a mistake, but my son is going to try and do better. And it's kind of like it gets better along the way. I love seeing that. And then the other thing that you were saying about entrepreneurship, I think one of the things that I realize is that being an entrepreneur here in the US is harder in terms of regulations and legalities when compared to our countries, because there's a lot of things that you can do that makes it so much easier to function as a business than when you're here. And I think in part of that is what makes entrepreneurship so difficult, because it's not like I just want to go and start selling bandanas tomorrow and just, I'll get to keep the money, don't have to really claim too much of it. It's a lot more structured and a lot more difficult because of that. So in tied with the education, I feel like we can have more resources, a lot more tools at our disposal to help us move forward, to help us grow these businesses, to also be able to have more guidance as to what we can and can't do, to stay legal and do things the right way, and then be able to flourish. So I feel a lot of those things where in these new generations, in these era that we're living in, that things have become a lot more available for us to get educated on, make it a little bit simpler to sustain and grow in several different areas of personal and business. So that's kind of where I was from those two angles from what you were saying.
Yeah. Maddie, I wanted to ask you, what about conflict, right? Like, how do you remember when we had Michelle on the show, and she's the one that trains people about the circle method, right? So anytime there's any, even just conversations in her family, so like every Sunday she runs a circle with her family. She has two children, herself and her husband, and they do a circle to kind of check in. uh I know my family never did that, right? Like we never, like there was a problem, like te regañaban, and then that was it, you know. So Maddie, I wanted to ask you, in reference to conflict, what are some things that maybe you learned, that was the culture of your household in reference to handling conflict, and have you mimic that, or have you made adjustments?
I am really bad when it comes to conflict because my first reaction is I cry. So I mean, and you guys know that, and I always say it. I wear my heart in my sleeve, and you see that what you see is what you get. This is me all the time. So, when I'm frustrated or I'm unable to kind of express myself, or not so much express myself, it's hard when you're trying to make somebody understand what you have in your head, and then it just doesn't translate. It's like, okay, we're not solving anything because we're not seeing the same thing, so that level of frustration. So I think, like Nicte said, I grew up a lot with, don't speak, like you're not allowed to have an opinion, or you don't have an opinion. You don't say, you do what I say, kind of thing. You listen, you have to obey, and it's the I guess the respect. It was like, I guess our parents were trying to teach us respect through fear, so that's kind of how it felt. So I think, now we have the opposite going on. It's like people are being fearless, and I have a voice. I could speak, I could say whatever I want. But it's like, okay, how do we find that balance of, you still can say whatever you want but still be respectful? Remember, you still speaking to an elder. It's like, you think about, like, I always joke around, but it's the truth. Like, even now, I'm almost 50 years old, and I think, if I would have said that to my mom, I would have no teeth, because I could just feel her hand coming to my face, and even though I'm, my 40s or whatever, it's like, if my mom hits me, there's no thought about hitting my mom back or holding her hand, because that would just make it worse, So, but that's, how I grew up, yes, the fear, but the respect. There's certain things that, even though I had a great relationship with my mom, and I could talk to my mom about anything, there was still that level of respect, of there's, I don't know if you guys seen the Instagram guy that, he always commenting on all the videos, and then he says respectfully, of course. So that's me, like that's kind of like the conversations that I will have with my mom, respectfully, but because you still want to, keep that level. So I think, that's kind of the struggle now. Before, it was like, you can't speak, you can't say, you can't voice your opinion because you're too young, you don't understand. It's like, even at my level of understanding, I couldn't express myself. And then now you're here, and like, you understand, and you want to give your child the opportunity to be able to express themselves. But it's like, remember, I'm your parent, I am your mother, I'm your elder, or we're trying to solve this situation. Just because you're frustrated doesn't mean just scream and say whatever you want to say. How can we communicate so that we both understand? So
Yeah, I think that's interesting too. Like with my sons, because let's say we had I can't remember a specific one, but like if there's a situation, I'm trying to get them to like replay what happened or what was said, like they will ask me for permission, like, can I say the curse word? And so, because they know how I feel about that, so I think it's finding that balance that you're talking about, Maddie, right? Like, I know you've heard these curse words. I know you've heard them. You probably heard me say them sometimes, but it doesn't give you the right to use that, like everyday language with me. Even with music, like I allow 2 or 3 curse words in a song if we're in the car, but if it's more than that, like we got to change the song, which is due, right? I might listen to it on my own when nobody's in the car, but if we're in the car together, we're gonna listen to the clean version. But I think it's just teaching them that respect. And then sometimes, especially during my divorce, I did want to create, because I know it was such a delicate time for all of us. And I've mentioned it before, where I just created a platform in my car so that whenever the three of us were in the car, anything could be said with no judgment and no consequences. So I think that's needed at time as well, because I think a lot of young people don't feel like they have that space with anyone. And then I've always told my children too, if you ever feel like you can't talk to me or your dad, you could go to this person here, and it was something that dad and I discussed as well. But I think with conflict for me, I'm still learning to handle the conflict, because I shy away from it, because I I have convinced myself that if we start to enter into conflict, like there's nothing that I could do to change your mind. So I feel
Mhm.
like I've hit a brick wall, and I think sometimes I don't find the words to express myself properly to get you to see my point of view. So even just recently, I learned to tell people I feel misunderstood right now.
Mhm.
And I think that allows the other person to kind of like stop talking and like absorb and like think about that, because it's
Mhm.
telling them, I guess, about my emotion and how I'm feeling about that. And I think sometimes it doesn't get resolved at that moment, and we can talk about it later, but it makes me feel at ease when I say that out loud, and it makes the other person chill out. So
Mhm.
that has worked for me. Um, and I don't know why. I don't know why I grew up like that, or why I handle conflict like that, because it really has been a challenge for me as an adult, to
Mhm.
be able to. I do it well at my job, maybe because I'm the boss and I know from the top how to maneuver it and not to abuse the person or talk down to the person. But when
Mhm.
it's the other way, where somebody's like putting me on check or something like that, then I tend to like just fringe, and I just don't know what to say. And I think maybe because I can't gather my thoughts into words that
Mhm.
are not going to hurt the person or me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, Nick? What about you?
Well, I just want to say, I feel it's very powerful how you address saying, I feel misunderstood, because I think sometimes when it's challenging to find the words to help people understand where we're coming from, it's far better to approach it how you did, because you're addressing to the point. It's about me. Like, I am not being understood, and it's not like you are not understanding where I'm coming from. So anytime we say something that it's the you, people are gonna shut down, because then they're immediately thinking you're blaming me, or and it's that choice of words sometimes that is hard to work with. And I love how you said that, because that does make people want to listen more than it kind of makes you pause and slow down. The other thing too is that, I don't know if you remember, Viviana, this book that we were hearing, the audiobook that It Doesn't Start With You. I
Mm-hmm.
forget the author's name. But in
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that for me, it was eye-opening, because he says how sometimes there's that generational trauma that is physically passed down. And I think a lot about the hardships that our older generations encountered, and how sometimes I feel this freeze for conflict comes from being in a constant flight or fight mode from, our families, what they encountered on. So you're kind of like in this pressure point. You just don't have time to think and process. You kind of just like freeze. And I feel like a lot of that has been passed down. And what I learned was that I was also in that freeze mode. Whenever I wanted to speak up, I would freeze and panic. So like Maddie, how you were saying you would cry, that was me a lot in my younger years, because I feel like I had no voice as a kid, and even a young adult, that I had all these pinned up things, and I was so afraid to speak up, because like, I'm gonna get hit for speaking up. And this was, like, I remember asking for a raise, that I was so afraid to ask my boss for a raise. And the nicest, kindest person ever, had nothing to do with how he approached things. He was one of the best bosses I had, but I was so afraid to ask for a raise. And when I told him, he's like, yeah, we can do a raise, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was panicking for no reason, but it was because of these things that you absorb, things that you keep up. And when I met my husband and we would get into a disagreement, I would start to cry. And he's like, "Why are you crying? Like, let's talk like adults. Let's pause." I did not get that. I'm like, "You're going to get mad at me?" Like, I'm not mad at you. Let's just talk about it. And that to me was the most beautiful thing that he could have done for me, because he taught me that you can actually have adult conversations and express how you feel. And you may not be seeing eye to eye, but at least like Viviana can say how you feel. Maddie can say how you feel. I can say how, if no one's crying, we're just listening to each other, kind of like the circle concept. And I feel that that has completely changed how I approach things, to where I don't longer feel the need to cry, to speak up and say, "Hey, well, this is happening," or that perspective. And it's like you kind of take off this weight off your shoulders. But I think that going to what the younger generation now is experiencing, it's kind of like we're in that pendulum. We went from one side to the complete opposite. Now we're kind of trying to find our way in between, of like the balance of, yes, it's good to speak up, but you don't want to go to where you're speaking up and then you're going back to like the insulting thing, like what we used to hear as kids, or so it's like finding that nice balance of giving people space, a safe space to say how they feel. I love your perspective, Viviana, on having your car be that safe space where you can say how you feel, and there's no repercussions of, "Hey, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm saying." I feel that's really powerful, and I can almost see how, when your kids become parents and how they're managing that, like, I feel like that'll have a positive effect. And they were at least given that opportunity to say, "Here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm feeling." And it kind of just helps that relationship kind of like pass down, like gets stronger and stronger with every generation. But I do feel like we're in this finding where our balance is now, and speaking up, but also being mindful of our words. And respect can be done through words and how we choose to say our words. But I think it's also like our body language gives us away. If you look at how people, I could be like, "Oh, Maddie, yes, you can say whatever you want. I really want you to say whatever." And then I'm here crossing my eyes and rolling my eyes. I'm like, "Okay, do you really feel that way?" Like, because your body is saying a whole different story. So like really being honest with our whole selves, our words, and our body language, to kind of help with that balance.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Maddie, but like I cry less now. Like I wish that I would cry sometimes. But before I used to cry out of frustration because I couldn't find my words, right? So I think I'm a really good listener. And I'm listening because I'm really processing what you're telling me, and I'm really trying to understand. And I'm telling you, like, I think therapy did this to me, but I am 100% convinced that you think what you think and you're going to do what you want to do, and me too, right? And we can have a conversation and try to convince each other, or try for you to see my point of view or vice versa. But at the end of the day, like I feel zero frustration because I I did my part and I expressed to you what I thought. Like, I give parents advice all the time about academics, right? So, like, I told this one lady, this happened recently, and I felt frustration because I've known her daughter for a long time. So I was like, do this. Like, I did this with my son. Like, trust me, it works. And then she's like, okay, bet. So she went and she did it, right? And then a week later, she went back and did something else. I'm like it frustrated me for a hot second, and I just kept it moving because there's nothing that I could do. You know what I'm saying? So and I live like that in a lot of everything that I do. And so that's why I think that's one of the reasons why I don't cry anymore, because I'm just like, hey, like it is what it like. But that's bad sometimes because I get seen as, oh, Viviana doesn't care, Miss Nonchalant or whatever. I do care. I just feel like I can't move you. Like you're moving at the way that you want to move. But I wish that I could cry more, for real.
But I think it's because we've been taught to perceive crying as you showing your emotions, when there are so many other ways to show your emotions and that you care and that you feel. That crying notion is just like a cultural across the board, not just like within the Hispanic and Latino cultures. That's just a cultural thing that has been ingrained on us because we physically can see something going that we know, oh, okay, this person is feeling something. But there's so many great ways to show a person that you feel through words, through listening, that it doesn't involve crying. And I think I learned that because I stopped, crying so much for everything. And I know we joked earlier in the first phases of the show where I would say I would cry for like a fly dying. Like it was like, so I was so in tune with my emotions. I just didn't know how to wrangle it. But I think there's power to when you feel like crying, you feel like crying, but there's other ways to express emotions. I think it's just that people aren't as in tune to observe. Like you, Viviana, you say you stop, you listen, you kind of process things differently. Because of the way that the world that we've lived in and are living in, we're kind of like go, go, go. We don't stop enough to see there's other cues that tell you a person is truly feeling or listening. It doesn't have to be crying all the time.
I've always thought, Maddie, that crying is like a release. And it makes you feel better after you cry. Like I think the last time that I cried a lot was in December because I was watching a series, and the end, I telling you, I cried for like over 5 minutes. I was like, oh my, like I felt like I knew the guy and something bad happened to, like I
Like, I'm
really, really did.
alive. I'm alive.
I was like I think I got so engulfed into the show and the characters, and because it could be, real life situations, but like that's the last time that I remember like crying like with my heart.
Yeah, I think it again, when you're in conflict, it just kind of depends on the situation too, because you were talking about at work and, talking to the parents, like, I mean, I give suggestions every day at work. That's my job, So it's like I can tell you, I can give you advice. Sometimes, clients come in and they, it's like, okay, I had a fee on my account. Can you refund the fee? I said, okay, let's look at the fee. Let's try to figure out why you got the fee and how we can avoid the fee from happening again. No, I want my feedback. No, you see, like, I'm not doing my job by just giving you the feedback and not trying to prevent, how this doesn't happen again. Because if I give you the fee today and then you come back tomorrow, I got another fee because you did the same thing, then I'm not helping you. How can I help you? It's my job. You want the fee, you're going to listen to everything I got to say, So sometimes, you do try to give the advice and, and try to tell people, but it's up to you if you want to listen or not. I think when it comes to a more personal like I think for you, Viviana, you probably haven't gotten there because, like I'm telling you, dealing with adult children, it's a whole other monster when you're dealing with adult children, because it's like, I've been there, done that. I've gotten myself in that same position, and I've gotten myself out of there. And sometimes, as parents, we see our children going down the rabbit hole, and it's like, don't go down that door, go down this one, it's going to hurt less or whatever. But they don't understand that because they haven't been hurt the first time. So it's hard to explain. It's hard to get them out of there. It's hard as a parent to understand that you have to let them go through down the rabbit hole, let them crash, and then let them come out of it. The frustration is like, I would never, again, going back to what we were saying, I would never say that to my mom, or I would never talk to an elder like that, and then having to, to go through it and just kind of exist. And it's that frustration of, how can I explain that this is not right, but I want to hear what you have to say. It's just the way that you're saying it. But it's like, so yeah, so it's hard when it hits you so close to home. It's a different level of expression. And like you said, you're crying a lot less. I'm learning. I think every day, as humans, we learn how to, I guess, the more things happen, the different that you react to it. Like we were saying at the beginning, you make the mistake, but you make it in a different way. So it's the same thing. You kind of learn. You kind of walking and you hit yourself with the corner of the table. You eventually learn that you kind of have to scoot this way so that you don't hit the table. So it's kind of the same thing. The more that it happens, you learn how to react to certain things. And I would say, I don't cry as much, even though I cry all the time. I don't cry as much. I try to use my words a little bit more. I try to ask for help, intervention, you try to utilize your resources. Again, I am a crier at heart. And, sometimes I think, that sometimes I see it as a weakness, but sometimes I don't, because I feel sometimes when you bottle too many things inside of yourself and you don't let them out, eventually you're going to explode, and it's going to show up one way or another. So either you're going to have a heart attack, or you're going to have a panic attack, and you're going to cry for days. So I'm glad, Viviana, that you cry for 5 minutes in a row, so at least we know you're not going to explode anytime soon, so, but there has to be some type of release. And again, it doesn't have to be in tears, because like we said, everybody is different and everybody expresses themselves in different ways. So I guess it's just finding your thing.
Yeah. And I think too, when I got exposed to the emotional wheel, I was like, oh my God. Because all I would use before was, I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated. I'm crying because I'm frustrated. I'm mad because I'm frustrated. And everything was only frustrated. But then I learned about all these other emotions, and I keep the emotional wheel in my office, and I'll pull it up in a heartbeat online if I don't have it. And I use it for me, and I use it for other people. And like you were saying, Nick, that maybe I have found to identify that emotion. And so maybe I don't cry because of that, because now I can put a word to it. And when I cry, I just cry because it came out. Like I'm not trying to fight it when it comes out, so it's just, I guess, just accepting of who we are as individuals, and that, Maddie's a crier and Viviana's not, so, and it's okay. I'm not trying to be more of a crier, because then I'll complain about I cry too much. We're never satisfied. So I think it's just having, kind of having that balance. Before we go on, I just wanted to say hello to Lily Matos, Nikauri Jackson. Lily dijo que es muy bueno llorar, es parte de tener sentimientos. Yeah, for some of us. I can still have sentimientos and not cry. All right, Nick? And then we also want to say hello to Mimi, which is Amaya, Nikauri's daughter. She's my goddaughter. And Julian, because they always watch the show. And Angelica, my grandmother, she always watches the show. And our crew from Colombia and Florida and New Jersey and New York. And we're going to put the Dominican Republic in there too. And Venezuela and Colombia and Mexico, since that's where Nick is from. But I find this topic super intriguing, because everybody's so different and we'll respond to it different, right? And even when you start to date, or your children start to date, and how we respond with our mate, and how we see our children responding with their mate, is pretty interesting. With my oldest son, with his girlfriend, we were talking about that a couple of weeks ago, because we had dinner with her parents, and we were just talking about the type of parents that my son has, which is myself and his dad. And we were, I don't know, there's a movie, I got to find the name of the movie, but there's a movie that shows the couple, they're like sitting up on the bed, and then the girl, both of her parents are next to her, and with him, both of his parents are next to him. And they're talking about how everything from her end, comes into the relationship, and also for him. And I just think that there's so many things that, and we even maybe even notice it, things that I do that my mom does, that I don't even have to think about, but I do it. And, or even my grandmother. And then some things like maybe I hate, and some things I love. So I think it's just embracing those things. And what I was telling my son's girlfriend just like knowing that it's there, like just know that your mate grew up with a crazy dad and like a great mom, and this is just who he is. And at least you know what you're coming into, right? And just being able to kind of handle that. Because I think, when you have these two people in a relationship that come from two different worlds, they handle conflict. You both could be Dominican, right? But both of you were raised different. How do you come to that happy medium to be able to deal with conflict, right? So like Nick said, with you and your husband, I hear you saying a lot of how he really taught you to do things different. And it's almost like you needed to be with someone like him to kind of make the adjustment for you to be better, for you to be able to teach that to your son, right? Because like do you see Nick, their son in the back? I think he's like low key hiding, but we can still see
Playing
you.
with his Legos.
But I think it's wonderful. But I just think it's. I remember when my oldest son was younger, because he was the only one that I had at the time. I felt like I'm going to brainwash him, right? Because I think that as parents, we can do that. When they're little, I can teach you to only eat vegetables and fruits and stuff like that. And then once you get out into this world, you make decisions and you eat what you want to eat, right? But I think we can really give them that foundation. I think that's the most powerful thing about parenting, is that I can really kind of mold you, almost, maybe not, definitely not 100%, but I could really try and mold you and pour into you. And like with my children, I've apologized to them a lot of times because they know that I don't know what I'm doing sometimes. And I think that that's the beauty, and that's the beauty of life. And I hope that one day they do that with their children, to just know, like, I'm not a robot. Even with my tutoring company, my clients think that they're hiring a tutor and the tutor is 100% and they know everything. We don't. We're not robots. Same thing in the banking industry or in graphic design. You are going to make a mistake from time to time. So I think it's, we talk about giving each other's grace, but I just think it's important to kind of take the time to learn where you got some of these things and know, do I like it? Do I not like it? Do I want to fix it? Because some people may like the sassiness about someone, and they don't want to get rid of it, which is fine. So I just think that that's important. And our time is almost up. But before we go, I wanted to ask you, ladies, what are some things what is the takeaway, I guess, right? Of what is it that you're definitely going to tell your children as a general rule to look out for, like as an individual, like for you, like, accept people for who they are, or whatever that thing may be. Nick, what do you think?
I think the most powerful thing is kind of a 2-in-1, not to sell yourself out for the happiness of others. So don't do things because you think you need to win the happiness or the love of someone else at the expense of your joy and your happiness, because that's going to break you in the inside. And the other thing is how powerful self-awareness is. I don't think people are able to do that. And I know that's something that I learned from an early age. I just didn't know what that was. The more self-aware you can become, the more you can grow, the more you can, yes, you'll react, but I think that there's power in that growth where you can acknowledge, oh, I did this, but what's the lesson in this? If it's a failure, what can I do better? And really kind of having those hand in hand where you don't sell yourself out for the joy of someone else instead of like you being happy. You can help others, but if it's going to be at your own expense, you got to be aware of that and the self-awareness. I think that those things go hand in hand and can be really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. What about you, Maddie?
Before I go into my response, I just want to say, it's so funny when you were talking about, you find yourself doing the same things that your parents would do. I do that a lot. And sometimes, you're like, okay, so why do you like cooking, for example, because my mom was an amazing cook, and I do love to cook. So like when I'm cooking, why do you do things this way? My mom used to do it that way. That's why I do it. I have no explanation. My food is not going to taste different. It's not going to taste better. mom did it like that, so I do it like that. And like with my granddaughter, I laugh all the time because I'd be making up songs and things that I say to her, and like sometimes I look at her and I'm like, porque tu linda, and she knows that I sing that to her, and then I find my daughter, like I hear my daughter in her bedroom singing it to her, and it's like, like that's my song, but no, I guess it's ours, so it's little things like that unconsciously, you just do because you hear, and it kind of happens. But like Nita said, self-awareness, I guess for me it's more, yes, you know express yourself. You are allowed to voice your opinion, to say who you are, to say what you think, because I think sometimes when we hold back and we don't express yourself, you go back and then you look at the situation and you're like, I wish I would have said this. It's okay to voice your opinion, but also become self-aware. And just because you have an opinion doesn't mean that you have to hurt the person who's receiving your opinion. We have to learn to express ourselves in a way that it makes sense to us, but doesn't necessarily need to put the other person down so that I can get my point across. So again, self-awareness, but communication skills are going to be very important, to utilize our words, to be able to say what I'm thinking without putting you down. And sometimes it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to happen 100% of the times. But again, I can voice my opinion without having to hurt you or put you down. Whether you receive the message or not, it's okay. But listening is also important.
Mm-hmm. I love everything you guys, you ladies said. I think for me is respect. So respect yourself and respect others. Uh, like respect who they are, right? So it's not just the way that you communicate with people and you use words that are respectful, but respect the person for who they are, and vice versa as well. So that's my that would be my advice to my kids. Before we go with your poem, Maddie, I wanted to read this. This is like a book, and I just kind of I started working on it and then I stopped. Oh my God, this is from a year ago. So last time I wrote in it was June 30th. 2024. So I picked it up today and I was like, oh, let me start doing it. So it's literally like tomorrow will be a year that I wrote in it. But I'm going to, pick it back up. But this is one of the quotes in the book. It says, don't watch the clock, do what it does, keep moving. And I love that quote because, when we look at a clock, it's constantly moving. Right. And then there's the seconds, the minutes, or the hour, but there's movement. So keep going because things will always come at you. It's just what we do with it when it comes. And Lili said, tratar a los demás como quisiera ser tratado. So that's what we're going with. This was a great topic. I love it because it's never, in my opinion, it never gets old to have that self-awareness. I know there's a lot of self-help books out there, but I think it's extremely important to know who you are. And if everybody finds out who they are, we can better communicate each other and respect each other. But we're ready for you, Maddie.
I want to say before I go into my poem, you had shared a video with us earlier today, Viviana, and I was kind of looking through the ladies' page, and in one of the videos, she said, sometimes when we are trying to explain a situation, we're trying to make the person's mind change, and things don't change when they do, things change when you do. And that makes so much sense, because again, I cannot expect you to be at the same place that I am at. I have to be able to meet you where you're at. And sometimes things are not going to make sense, and if that means me moving, another way, then that's something that I have to do for our well-being. I have to go this way instead of trying to go this way. So that was huge. And that hit me. It was like, whoa. Okay, so I'm going to read the first poem in my book, A Vision of She. I know I've read this poem before. It's been a while, but I think it was one of those first times that I ever came across confrontation, being 13 years old and not speaking English and being bullied and not understanding why. And it's not so much being bullied, it's how you come out at the end. So to the bully who tried to break her, little did you know that every punch was knocking down walls to reveal the heart of a fighter. But this poem is not for you. This poem is for her. For those times she had to bite her tongue, swallow her words, forced to wear spitballs like bows decorating her beautiful hair. For those times her body was kicked down the stairs, landing against the wall of shame, never prepared for the echo of laughter that followed. For all those times she wished she was never there, wiping tears from her eyes because she was sure that nobody cared for her. Because deep down, it still hurts not being able to make sense of all the hate for being different, hate for not speaking the language. There was this world between them and not enough time to put together the I don't like her with why can't we be friends. She had to learn that courage is found right next to desperation, right before the end, when you have to ball your fist and protect your self-respect for standing up to her bully, no longer afraid for the strong woman she became. She had to learn to nurture the fragile child inside of herself who will never understand, for being a survivor, for loving herself. This poem is for her.
Thank you, Maddie. That was perfect. I love it. Thank you. I hope you ladies have an amazing week. I hope our audience has an amazing week. Nick Audi said, se me hace la piel de gallina con ese poema. So there you go. That's our purpose. The goosebumps always. But I hope you guys have an amazing week, and we will be here again next Sunday at 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Thank you, Mark.
Chao, gracias. Thank you.
Whether you're a seasoned designer, dabbler, or just starting out, this course is for you.
Are just so impressed with them. Like I said, we've been with them for years. I will recommend and refer anyone to them. We stand by A+ academics. They're the best.
A+ tutorial really did help me with all my grades. They all went up when I came to this place. And I would say I recommend this school to everyone.
So it's a really good environment to be in, especially for me because it makes me look up to my parents.
If you have students that need academic help, A+ Academics is the place to be. A+ Academics, what a great place to go for academics.
It's just a really great place to learn.